And welcome to the Extra Mile Podcast Experiment. And on the hotline we have with us today Steve Bourne. Steve's with Hammer Nutrition. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing really well. It's cold and rainy, so it's not looking like a great outdoor exercising day, but you know what? That's what you get when you live in a beautiful green area. But everything's going great.
Good. Montana. We should tell our listeners you're in
yes,
the
we're
beautiful
up in
state of Montana.
Yeah, we're up in northwest Montana near Glacier Park, so it doesn't get a whole lot better than that, so we take the rain along with everything else.
Let's get started, Steve, with a little bit of background on Hammer Nutrition. Tell us a little bit about the company, how long has it been around, what do they do, and also maybe your background with the company, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, Hammer Nutrition started in the Bay Area. The owner and his wife, Brian and Sonia Frank, started the company in the Bay Area. They found back then, as did I when I was competing, that there wasn't much in the way of nutritional supplements that were geared for endurance athletes. Everything seemed to be geared for, the weightlifters and the bodybuilders. So they found that niche, and so the original name of the company was ECAPS, and that was started in the late 80s, around 1986, 87, in the Bay Area. And when Brian started developing fuels, he put those under the banner of Hammer Nutrition. Several years ago, he moved his family to Montana, and the company obviously went here up in Whitefish, Montana. And at some point we decided we were going to get rid of the ECAPS name because that was where all the supplements were, and then move everything under the Hammer Nutrition. So all of our supplements and fuels are now known as Hammer Nutrition, whereas several years ago the supplements were under the ECAPS banner. And then when we started developing fuels about 5 or 6 years later, they were under the Hammer Nutrition banner, but now everything's under Hammer Nutrition. We're up here in Whitefish, Montana. We've been in business for 23 years and counting. My background with the company is I was involved as one of their sponsored athletes back in the late 80s, early 90s, and a little over 10 years ago, I was in between jobs, and I'd been using the products religiously for 10 years or so. So by chance, I just happened to call Brian and said, can you use someone like me up at your offices? And I had been studying nutrition and fueling and supplementation. It was a hobby become passion for me. So I had been studying that for 10, 12 years and applying it, the things that I learned in my own training and racing. So I brought kind of a unique perspective in that I had, the book knowledge, so to speak, but I also was able to apply it in my racing and training. So I've been with the company for a little over 10 years. My main job, among a few things, my main job is to help athletes take the guesswork out of fueling. I think that's the one area in sports nutrition that has the potential to be the most confusing for athletes, and thus it's usually their weak point. We can get the training dialed in really easily or within a reasonable amount of time. The equipment is pretty easy to figure out, but we're so inundated with a gazillion products and all these strange theories on how to properly fuel the body. So I've taken 20 years of my individual studying, working with some really, really smart PhD nutritionists, and all my independent studying, using what I've applied in my training, and that's what I can bring to athletes is kind of a unique perspective on what works and what doesn't work in regards to fueling.
That dovetails perfectly into this whole interview because, honestly, I've been to your website. I downloaded a fantastic document you got on there for free called Guide to Success. Yeah,
the Endurance Athlete's Guide to Success. We're now working on the 9th edition of that. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm so passionate about that little book because
it's awesome.
10 years ago, that little fueling booklet was about, maybe 30 pages long. The 9th edition, because we've just embellished it with more information, more charts to help people figure things out a lot easier, and just some really good more information and pictures as well. The 9th edition is probably going to hit around 200 or so pages, so we've come a long way in 10 years, and that's kind of our position paper, so to speak, on how to properly fuel during exercise.
And there's
after, yeah.
Yeah, there's a link right on the front page of hammernutrition.com that I'll put in the show notes for everybody. But it's an absolutely free PDF file, and it's an awesome document. What I like about it is that it does go into a lot of detail. But yet, then at the beginning of each chapter, it will say, here's the key points to take away from this, so that it does dummy it down real well. And I got to tell you, that's what I want this interview to be, that we have to take all the detail and dummy it down for people who just want to say, here's 3-4 products, here's when you ought to take them, because as soon as we, like I think I told you in an email, as soon as we start mentioning serum sodium concentration, we're going to get people shutting off their iPods left and right.
Sure, there's a lot of information and a lot of science behind it. Just as an example, everything involving electrolyte replenishment is so complex that you really do need a PhD to understand it. And we have articles on our website that go into all the science and all the details and all the complexities of that. But, for us average people, we just want to know, what do I do before, during, and after exercise so that I can get the most out of the time I've put into my workouts, so I can have better races, and so I can enjoy, the experience at the same time. So that's my passion, is to be able to help athletes take the guesswork out of it and take the mystery out of it. And I'm not a big fan of the word dumbing down, but I think that's pretty applicable. I want it dummied down so I can understand it.
Sure. So let's break down this discussion then, and exactly like you just described. Let's talk a little bit about first how to hydrate and what to eat, and exactly how to act before a long run. And keep in mind, we are talking to runners here, so we're basically talking running versus biking or any other endurance sport. So let's talk a little bit about before the long run, and then during the long run, and then thirdly, what to do after we get done with our long run. But before I do, can you talk a little bit? I thought this was fascinating. Tell me a little bit about the Hammer Nutrition theory on the replacement versus replenishment.
That's our kind of our calling card, so to speak. We are adamant that, and just I cannot emphasize this enough. The human body is so marvelously designed, and it knows how to take care of itself in a crisis, in a situation. Its first instinct is survival. And when we start exercising, a lot of mechanisms in the body switch into survival mode. So when we start exercising, the body goes into survival mode, and all these wonderful hormonal influences on the body tell the body how to take care of itself. Now, of course, the body needs a helping hand. It needs some fluids. It needs some calories. It needs some electrolytes to keep it doing what you want it to do. But we have to understand that we need to work in cooperation with the body and all these hormonal mechanisms that are already built in to protect it. So our belief is proper fueling is not trying to replace X out with X or near X back in. The body's not designed to do that. For example, you may be burning 5, 6, 7, 800 calories an hour, but your body is simply not equipped to accept from a fuel donation anywhere near that amount. And it knows this. It has built-in mechanisms, and this is true with hydration and electrolytes and salts and calories. It has built-in mechanisms that very effectively bridge the gap between what the body is losing and what it can comfortably accept in return from you. So our premise is that while it's interesting to know how many liters of fluid you're losing and how many grams of salt you may be depleting, those are all fun figures to know, but they have very little to do with what can the body accept in return from my fuel donation. And too often, athletes try too hard to help themselves, and when they do, they run into more problems than they resolve. So our recommendation is to work in cooperation with the body, knowing that it knows how to take care of itself. It needs a helping hand, but you don't want to kill it with kindness. And I've seen a lot of athletes do it, be it runners or cyclists, especially when it comes to hydration or salt intake. They overwhelm their body with too much fluid and too much salt, and that can have some serious consequences. As you know, some people have hydrated themselves to such an extreme that they've suffered water intoxication and die.
Right.
So the real idea, proper fueling, does not mean replace X out with X in, not even near X in. It's replace what the body can comfortably accept from your donation, and that's about a third, probably about 33%, or about a third of what you're losing on average. So the goal is to fuel in cooperation with the body and forget about how many calories you're burning. The body knows how to take care of itself. Give it a helping hand, then get out of its way, let it do what it's built to do, and watch how it performs.
It struck me as so interesting when I read that, because I can't tell you how many times I've read an article that said something to the effect, weigh yourself before, weigh yourself after. You can tell how much you're losing while you're out there, and you got to make sure you put that in while you're running. You've lost a liter of sweat. You better put a liter of liquid back in.
Yeah, well, when it comes to hydration, most of the time we're all going to end up slightly dehydrated from the effort. We don't want to lose more than 2, maybe 3% of our weight coming in, but there have been so many studies on proper hydration. Dr. Tim Noakes is probably the godfather of hydration. And he has found, working with thousands and thousands of ultra runners and marathon runners, that when they were putting in a liter or more of fluid an hour, they were the ones that were suffering from overhydration, which at the very least will cause cramping, but at the extreme causes what's called dilutional hyponatremia, which is a medical emergency. So, again, the body is not designed to accept from your fuel donation, be it fluids, calories, or electrolytes, anywhere near what it's losing, and it knows how to take care of itself. So you want to give your body a donation, but it has to work in cooperation with the body. So
let's say we're going to take a long run, and long being, obviously that's a relative term, but let's say 2 hours plus. Because at this point in the Extra Mile Podcast experiment, most of us are into the anywhere from the low teens to the 20-mile mark now in our long run. So take us, say, the week before, all the way up to the time we set out the door. Can we carbo load? Can we load up on water? How should we be acting up to that point when we head out the door?
Well, you ask a really great question, Kevin, and I'm going to try and make this as abbreviated as possible, because this is one of the areas that I'm real zealous about. Let's talk first about hydration. On a daily basis, to maintain adequate hydration, aside from what you're using during exercise, we have found that taking your body weight in pounds and dividing it in half or multiplying by 0.5 gives you a good gauge as to how many fluid ounces you should be taking in. So, for example, a 180-pound guy would probably want to take in 90 ounces of fluid, ideally water, throughout the day to maintain hydration status. On a warm weather day, you can bump that up a little bit. So instead of multiplying by 0.5, let's multiply by 0.6. So that's about 108 fluid ounces. So take your body weight in pounds, multiply it by 0.5 to 0.6, and work your way up to that. Don't do it cold turkey. If you're only drinking 8 ounces of water a day, you don't want to jump all the way up to 100 ounces, but you should work your way up so that your regular daily fluid intake, ideally from water, is about half of your weight in pounds or slightly more. So that's a good general rule to follow. The week before the race, I think most athletes tend to overcompensate. This is a time when the body is basically in reparation mode. It needs to rest, and it's not burning as many calories. It's not utilizing as much fluids or salts or other electrolytes, and it's a time that we need to taper, both in terms of the training volume and intensity and in our fluid intake and calorie intake. I've seen far too many athletes who start doubling or tripling their fluid and calorie intake, thinking they're like a camel and that their body's going to store it so that come race day, I'm going to have this in reserve. But truth be told, if you take in all those extra calories, your body is not going to know what to do with them. In my opinion, carbo loading is not what you do the night before the race. It is not what you do the week before the race. It is what you do in the first 0 to 90 minutes after all of your workouts in the weeks leading up to the race. That's the time. That's the window of opportunity that the body says, okay, I'm drained. You've drained me. And if you're going to go out and do another hard workout again tomorrow, I'm going to be better prepared. So as part of as part of the adaptation that your body undergoes through your training, it learns how to store more and more minutes of a fuel called muscle glycogen in the muscles. And you have to do that. The only way you can effectively add or maximize your glycogen stores is by training and by refilling the tank, so to speak, when the body is most receptive to that. And the time the body is most receptive to restoring its glycogen levels is in a very short window after workouts are over. I won't bore you with all the details. There's an enzyme in the body that is really hopping in the first 0 to 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours after exercise. That enzyme is responsible for taking your food intake and converting it into glycogen and storing it in the muscles. So as you become fitter and the more consistent you are with ASAP post-workout refueling, your body rewards you by storing more and more minutes of glycogen in the muscles. Now, that enzyme in the body is only active during a very short time period after a hard workout. In the week before the race and in the night before the race, that enzyme is on sleep mode. So all those extra calories that you're taking in are only going to be passed through the bowels, or they're going to be stored as body fats. I guess what I'm saying, Kevin, is that when you get to the week before the race, you don't want to deviate too much from what got you there in the first place. So I would not recommend doubling up on my fluid intake, salting everything in sight, or just downing food like there's no tomorrow, because quite frankly, your body won't know what to do with it.
What about very shortly before our long runs? Let's say the morning of. Suppose I get up, I'm starving to death. Do I want to eat something an hour, 2 hours, or what's the deal there?
It depends on the length of the workout, and this is a concept that has a lot of science behind it, but every time we recommend it to athletes, they look at us like we've got lobsters coming out of our eyeballs or something like that. If your workout is, say, over 60 minutes, and you could probably bump that up to 90 minutes, it is better to refrain from eating anything for the 3-hour period between from when you get up and the start of the workout. In other words, if you have, say, a workout at 11 o'clock, you want to finish any pre-exercise food consumption 3 hours prior. That will allow insulin and all of its hormonal influences on the body to go back down to baseline. You want them there when you start a workout or a race that is in excess of 60 to 90 minutes. If you eat too close to the start of the race or a workout that's longer than 60, 90 minutes, say if you eat an hour or two prior, what happens is insulin and all of its hormonal influences are still revving on high, and all of that glycogen that took you many, many weeks to accrue, you're going to burn through that in record time. So simply by timing your pre-exercise food consumption wrong, you can devastate what took you a long time to earn. At your fittest, and if you've been real consistent with post-workout refueling, be it from high-quality foods or a post-exercise replacement drink,
okay,
you will build up about 60 to 90 minutes of glycogen in the muscles. So the last thing you want to do is accelerate the rate at which they're burned. But if you eat sooner than 3 hours prior to the start of exercise, that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to blast through those glycogen stores so rapidly that all of that hard work is just devastated. So bottom line is, when you start a workout or a race, if it's longer than 60 to 90 minutes, if you refrain from eating for 3 hours prior to the start, that will allow your body to utilize its finite stores of glycogen more efficiently. That just translates into better endurance. Now, if the race is a short race, that no eating 3-hour prior rule does not apply. But if you're going to be out there for more than 90 minutes, we have 3 recommendations. Number 1, if you have a comfortable window in which to finish a small pre-workout, pre-race meal, and you only need about 400 or 500 calories tops to do that, if you have a comfortable 3-hour window in which to finish it, go for it. Make sure that it's lower devoid of refined sugar, saturated fats, and you probably want to avoid fiber as well so you don't have to make an unexpected pit stop at mile 12 or whatever. So if you have a comfortable 3-hour window in which to finish a small pre-race meal, go for it. If you are just jonesing for something to eat before the start, we recommend something no more than 5 or 10 minutes prior to the start. A serving of Hammer Gel or a swig from your fuel bottle of Heat or Perpetuum about 5 to 10 minutes prior to the start is better than 1 to 2 hours prior, because by the time those calories are ingested and your blood sugar levels are elevated, you're already well into your race. So that's another option. If you have to eat before the start, try and have a little something, a banana, a serving of Hammer Gel, a swig of your Heat or Perpetuum bottle about 5-8 minutes prior to the start. That physiologically makes more sense than 1 to 2 hours prior. Or the third option is simply start the workout on an empty stomach and begin fueling shortly after you feel comfortable. For me, it's usually 20 minutes in, okay, the body's warmed up, I'm ready to take on fuel. So long story short, you have 3 options. Finish a pre-race, pre-exercise meal 3 hours prior. If you have to have something before it starts, finish it about 5, no more than 8-10 minutes prior to the start, or just start on an empty stomach and begin refueling shortly after you feel warmed up. And the cool thing about this is that this is applicable, even though it doesn't make sense. It may seem counterintuitive, but this is 100% applicable even after a full night's sleep. In other words, if you go to bed with 60 to 90 minutes of glycogen, which is the first fuel your body's going to use when your workout or race begins, if you go to bed with 60 to 90 minutes of glycogen stored in the muscles, that's exactly what you're going to wake up with. You haven't drained 1 calorie, not 1 gram of that premium fuel. So even though your brain may be saying, I'm hungry, you feed me, and your stomach may be growling, really your muscles are like, hey, we're good to go, let's do this thing. So the point is that even after a full night's sleep, even though your brain is hungry, you can start the workout or race on an empty stomach.
That's great. That's interesting.
Very interesting, and again, it's one of those things. It's the article that I've written that has generated by far the most skepticism. But in 10 years of working with athletes, be they runners or triathletes or whatever, not one person in 10 plus years who has applied those principles has ever said, you know what, this doesn't work. It works like a charm. So even though it may not make sense, up in the brain, physiologically speaking, following that practice makes perfect sense.
Okay, so now we've started our long run. It's either our long run or our marathon. What's our body looking for in a 2+ hours, let's say 2 to 5, maybe 6 hours, if we're going to be out there for a long marathon, in the way of hydration, calories, and electrolyte replacement?
Okay. Fluid intake, most of the studies done show that a fluid intake, and this is be it sports drinks and water, everything combined, your hourly fluid intake should be somewhere between 16 to 28 ounces per hour. Now, a very lightweight athlete will probably only need maybe 15, 16 ounces an hour. If you're a larger athlete and it's really hot outside, you could probably bump that up to about 30, 31 ounces per hour. But in general, if you take, say, a small or a large water bottle, that's somewhere around 20 to 25 ounces. Just as a visual, that's a good gauge as far as how much fluid you should be taking in per hour to maintain optimal hydration status, but without putting you at the risk of overhydrating. So take a look at what a small water bottle looks like and what a large water bottle looks like. And if you're a lighter weight athlete or if it's cool, you probably won't need what the equivalent of a small water bottle is, 20 ounces. You may need only 16 or 17 ounces. Conversely, if you're a large athlete and the weather's hot outside and you're looking at that 25-ounce bottle, you could probably bump that up to another few ounces to about 28 or 29 ounces. But in general, for hydration on an hourly basis, for the average person, we're looking at about 20 to 25 ounces per hour, plus or minus 3 or 4 ounces on either end, depending on your body size, the weather outside, and how well or poorly you're acclimated to it. So that takes care of hydration.
Okay.
Now, as far as calories, if you're doing anything in, say, the 2-3 hour range, you can do it all on carbohydrates. So you don't need any protein. But once you get into that third hour and beyond, your body is going to start tapping or requiring a little protein in the fuel mix. Because glycogen stores will be running low, the body is going to switch over to burning mostly fat. In fact, two-thirds, once you hit hour number 2 and beyond, about two-thirds of your energy requirements will be fulfilled from body fat stores. And we all, I don't care how lean you are, we all have at least 40,000 calories available. So that's why we don't need to replace that 700-800 calories an hour that we're burning with equal amounts. Body fat stores take care of the difference between what our body is burning and what it can accept from in return from you. So for the average size athlete, and again, this you need to test this in training, but we found that somewhere between 240 to 280 calories per hour very easily takes care of calorie requirements without overwhelming your body with too many calories. And, of course, if you're a lighter weight athlete, 180 to 200 calories an hour will be certainly enough. When I was racing, and this was bike racing, I weighed about 190 pounds. I've never been the lightest guy on a bike, but I never took in more than 300 calories an hour. And I was doing races that were in the 30 to 40 hour range nonstop. So I was giving my body enough calories to keep the engine, going, to keep the fire burning, but I wasn't overwhelming it with too many. Instead, I let my body fat stores take care of the difference between what I was burning and what my body could comfortably accept in return. So for anything between 2 and 3 hours, you can get by very easily on carbohydrates only. And we prefer complex carbohydrates, maltodextrins, instead of any of those simple sugars that end in OSE like glucose or sucrose. We prefer complex carbohydrates because they give you a longer-lasting energy and because they allow your body to accept, digest, and convert into energy more calories than it can from simple sugars like glucose or sucrose. Now, so for the first, say, if you're doing a race that takes you 2 to 3 hours, complex carbohydrates only. That would mean Hammer Gel or Heed. Hammer Gel is our gel, energy gel product. Heed is our sports drink. They are both very similar in what they do. So if you're doing something in the 2 to 3 hour range, Hammer Gel or Heed would be perfect. When you get beyond that, about 5 to 15% of your energy requirements are going to be fulfilled from protein. So if you don't provide a little protein to the body or in your fuel mix, the body is still going to need to satisfy 5 to 15% of its energy requirements from protein. And if you don't provide it in the fuel mix, your body is going to literally steal it out of the muscle tissue. The last thing you want to do, and the longer you go, the more problematic this becomes, the last thing you want your body to do is to literally digest or cannibalize its own lean muscle tissue to make energy. Number one, when your body has to resort to breaking down muscle tissue to make energy, that means your recovery is going to take a lot longer because you have that much more muscle tissue that needs repairing. But the other issue that is involved is when the body starts tapping into the lean muscle tissue to satisfy a small percentage of its energy requirements, one of the byproducts is ammonia. And I would argue that it is excess ammonia that is the primary cause for premature fatigue. So what can you do to help prevent excess ammonia from accumulating? Well, you take a fuel like Sustained Energy or Perpetuum that has both complex carbs and a small donation of protein. Now your body has an alternate protein source that it can use instead of having to rely on cannibalizing the lean muscle tissue. So just to make a long story short, if you're doing anything in the 2 to 3 hour range, a complex carbohydrate fuel like hammer gel or heat will work perfectly. If you're doing anything longer than that, your primary fuel, and I would say 2/3 to 3/4 of the time, should have a little protein in there, and sustained energy or perpetuum would be ideal from that. You could use perpetuum or sustained energy from beginning to end, from the start to the finish, or you could use it as your primary fuel, say 2/3 to 3/4 of the time, and then using hammer gel or heat during that other portion of the time, just for some variety in the menu.
Great. What about electrolyte replacements?
Electrolyte replacement is very important because if the calories you're eating are the body's gasoline, the electrolytes I like to refer to as the body's motor oil. It's not what makes the engine run, but boy, is it important for keeping the engine from seizing. And electrolyte replenishment does not mean salt, sodium chloride. Yes, salt is a very important component of electrolyte replenishment, but it is not the whole story. It's a very complex subject, but in a nutshell, your body needs more than just salt. It needs calcium and magnesium and potassium, along with the sodium and the chloride that make up salt. The body will produce energy more efficiently, and many important bodily functions will work more efficiently when the body has an adequate supply of all the electrolytic minerals: calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, chloride. When the body has a sufficient supply of all of those, it will work more efficiently. And to be honest with you, while we do want to prevent bad things like cramping from happening, the real reason that you take an electrolyte replacement product like Endurolytes is to make sure that many important bodily functions are working full steam ahead. In other words, the optimal performance of many important bodily functions like your central nervous system, your digestive system, your cardiovascular system, and of course your muscular system, their optimal performance, at least to some degree, is dependent on having adequate electrolyte support. And when you start cramping, there are many theories as to cramping, but one of the primary causes is inadequate electrolyte replenishment. That's kind of like the motor oil light on the car coming on saying, hey, you better refill the oil reservoir or the engine's going to seize.
Right.
And that's a point you don't want to get to, because by the time you start cramping, all of these important bodily functions have been deteriorating for quite a long time. So just as important as the fluids you're drinking and the calories you're eating, it's important to replenish the electrolytes that you're losing via perspiration and that you're also losing internally, like the motor oil in the car. They're not only being lost via perspiration and urination, but your body is using them internally to make sure that many important bodily functions are working optimally. So we make a product called Endurolytes. It comes in capsules. And the reason why we do that is because what a 120-pound athlete needs is far less than what a 180-pound athlete needs. And having the product in capsules allows you more flexibility with the dose. In fact, what you need at 8 in the morning may be totally different than 2 in the afternoon, if only because the weather may be getting hotter. If it's a hilly course, chances are you're going to be using a lot more muscle fibers and thus using more electrolytes. So having an electrolyte replacement product that is in a form that allows you more flexibility with the dose makes more sense than a one-size-fits-all product that just can't work for all people under all conditions all the time. So our suggested dose for Endurolytes is, this is a general dose, and it's 1 capsule for every 50 pounds, maybe 60 pounds of body weight, but you need to adjust that based on your fitness level, your body weight, the weather outside, how well or poorly you're acclimated to the weather, because all of those variables come into play in determining, how much electrolyte support do I need. So on an hourly basis during a race, we're looking at somewhere between 16 and 28 ounces of water per hour. Depending on the duration of the race, we're replenishing with complex carbohydrates. If it's over 3 hours, we want to add some protein to the mix. So you want to use a fuel at least part of the time that has some protein in it. And then for electrolyte replenishment, we want to replace those as well so that we keep that oil reservoir in the body topped off. So we're replacing our fluids, we're replacing our calories, and we're replacing our electrolytes. Those three things in fueling, I believe when they're done independent of each other, it allows the athlete, the individual athlete, to meet their ever-changing needs much more precisely.
Okay, so we've made it through our long run somehow with the products you're talking about, with the aid of the products you're talking about. Now we're done. You touched on a little bit before, but now this all important 60 to 90 minute after the run. What is our body looking for, and what do you guys make to help with that?
The body is looking for carbohydrates to refill the tank. Again, as we talked about earlier, as an adaptation to the stress you're putting on your body in training, the body's going, you know what, if Kevin is going to do this to me tomorrow, I got to be better prepared. So your body learns how to store more and more minutes of this premium fuel called muscle glycogen. And the more fit you become and the more consistent you are with post-workout refueling, your body rewards you by storing up to 60, maybe 90 minutes worth of this fuel. And it is a huge advantage to get to the starting line with a 90-minute reservoir of this premium fuel. So how do you maximize glycogen stores? Number one, you train, and number two, you put some high-quality food or a good high-quality recovery drink back into your body as soon as possible. And the reason why you want to do it quickly is because the enzyme that controls glycogen synthesis and storage is really active in that first 0 to 60, maybe 90 minutes after workout. So you want to strike while the iron is hot. And so you want to get some food or fuel back into your system as soon as possible. So you need carbohydrates. That will help refill the glycogen stores. And you need some protein so that the muscle tissue can repair, so it has the raw materials, the amino acids it needs for repairs. Now, I don't know about you, but when I get done with a workout, oftentimes I am too tired to make a really healthy sit-down meal, and oftentimes my stomach is saying, time out, I'm not ready to take in solid food. So we make a recovery drink called Recoverite that contains a 3-to-1 ratio of complex carbs and really, really good quality whey protein, which we think is the ideal protein source for rebuilding muscle tissue. A couple of scoops in 8, 12, 16 ounces of water, drink it down. You've just put the finishing touches on your workout, and you've just kick-started the recovery process. Your body now has a nice dose of carbohydrates that it will refill the muscle storage or the muscle glycogen tanks with, and it has a nice donation of protein that will help with the muscle tissue rebuilding. And then lastly, in Recoverite, we put an amino acid in there called glutamine, which you could write a book about all of its benefits. But glutamine is probably the key amino acid for maintaining your immune system. So when you get done with a long workout or race, your body is saying, you know what, I can get stronger or I can basically go in the toilet. It's your call. So the athletes that heed that call, that put some high-quality carbohydrates and protein back in their body as soon as possible, that tips the scales into rebuilding the lean muscle tissue stronger, storing more glycogen in the muscles and the liver, and that is what you want to do. I'm a big proponent of recovery because how well you recover today determines how well you're going to perform tomorrow. So as my old coach used to say, when the workout's done, the workout's not done, not until you put some fuel back in your body. The easiest way to do that is with a good recovery drink, and we make what we think is an excellent one called Recoverite. It has everything your body needs after a workout is in terms of carbohydrates, protein, and some immune system boosting aids.
Quite honestly, Steve, sometimes I wonder, help me with this. We do all this. We take all these products that or like products that you're talking about here. How do we know? At any one point do we know that this stuff's really working? You know what I mean? It's like I go out for a long run, it's 15 miles or whatever, I come back, chances are I'm going to feel whipped no matter what.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, well, did this stuff help me? Would I feel worse had I not taken it? You know what I mean?
I think
what
you hit the nail right on the head. I think just what you said hits the nail on the head. Again, we want to be able to increase gradually, incrementally, our training volume and intensity. But unless you give the body nutritional support to do that, it can't respond. You're not going to allow the body to make improvements. Instead, you're going to be taxing the body even more, which may lead to more sick days. So you will see when you fuel the body properly during exercise, when you maintain optimal hydration status throughout the day, and when you take the time to put some fuel back in your body after exercise, you will experience greater endurance and less sick days because your body has the materials it needs to get the full value out of what you put into training. And it is a gradual process. You're not going to be able to go from 0 miles to 15 miles in a week or whatever. It's different for everyone. But you're giving your body what it needs so that it can perform and do what you want it to do, allowing your body to make gradual increases in your training and volume without your immune system or your muscular system taking such a beating. So, yeah, the thing is you will see improvements in your endurance and how quickly you recover. You'll be able to train for a longer period of time, and you will probably notice that your immune system is thanking you on a daily basis because you're not getting sick. And when you're sick, you can't train. So these products and these fueling recommendations are important not just for enhancing the quality of your workouts or improving the duration of your workouts, but also improving your immune system functioning as well.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end here, but there's a couple other things I want to touch upon. I have a buddy who, during his long runs, actually eats gummy worms. Okay, so something just sounds nasty about that. Tell us the top 3 biggest mistakes you see that people in endurance running specifically make.
Number one, I think far too many athletes over all spectrums of endurance athletics, I think they rely on simple sugars, 1 or 2 chain carbohydrates, anything that ends in ose, like glucose, sucrose, fructose. The main problem with that is that it gives you a quick spike in energy, which is followed by a fairly dramatic and utterly noticeable plummet in energy. So you feel good for about 10, 15 minutes, and then for the next half hour, you're digging yourself out of an energy rut. So one of the reasons why we do not use any kind of simple sugars in our products is because the quality of the energy you get from simple sugars is just it's just inadequate. To use a kind of a bad analogy, when you use simple sugars like glucose or sucrose to fuel the body, it's kind of like lighting a piece of paper on fire. Yeah, you get some heat, but it burns quick, hot, and then it's out. When you use complex carbohydrates to fuel the body, it's kind of like putting a big log on the fire. It burns more evenly, more consistently, more smoothly. It burns for a longer period of time. And when the heat or energy dies down, it's much more gradual. So the number one problem I see with athletes is that they rely too much on simple sugars. We are completely anti-simple sugar. So if you see anything that ends in OSE, run away from it. It's not.
That's a gummy worm, isn't it?
Most of that stuff is nothing but sugar. Okay. It is all sugar. The other thing that I see is I believe that most athletes either drink too much fluid or not enough. So we want to keep them within that 16 to 28 ounces per hour. The third thing that I see is that athletes rely too heavily on salt tablets. And without going into all the complexities, again, salt is a very important component of electrolyte replenishment, but it's not the whole picture, and you will run into just as many problems if you oversalt your body in your diet and during exercise than if you underdo it. We have more than enough sodium in our bodies thanks to the average American daily diet. So moderate sodium intake, along with all the other electrolytic minerals, is really the key to effective electrolyte replenishment. And the last thing, if I could add a fourth thing, it would be that athletes consume too many calories. They try to replace X out with X in, not remembering that the body has plenty of calories available from body fat stores, which very easily bridge the gap between what it's burning and what it can accept from you. So those are the most common mistakes I've seen, and that's why our motto is less is best. You know, it's a lot easier, Kevin, to fix a not enough problem. Okay, maybe I didn't take in enough calories. I'm starting to feel fatigued. That's an easy problem to fix. You just take in more calories.
Right.
And compared to I overdid it problem, you know, because once you put those excess calories into your body, they're not coming out, at least not the way you want to. So if you're going to make an error, I think it's better to err on the not enough side, if only because it's a lot easier problem to fix than a too much side. And when you look at all of our fueling recommendations, they are very conservative because we're working in cooperation with the body, knowing that the body knows how to take care of itself, and we want to give it a body cooperative dose of fluids, calories, and electrolytes, and then let the body do what it's designed to do.
Great, Steve. So now let's boil this down. First of all, the website is hammernutrition.com. I want to try your products, and I'm a runner, and I'm doing long runs every other week, and my long runs now are, say, 2.5 hours, all the way up to 4 to 5 hours. Help me list, let's say, 4 of your products. I'm going to go to your website. I'm going to order this stuff and try it. Because you have a lot of products that we can't do justice to in our short amount of time here, and everybody should go to that website and check out a lot of stuff that you guys offer. But
we make about 24 supplements that we haven't even talked about.
Right.
Maybe we'll save that for another day. But I think getting the fueling dialed in is the most important thing. Everything else is important, but getting your fueling, what you're putting in your body during and after exercise, is really important. We make 2 long-distance fuels. One is Sustained Energy that was developed in 1992, and we haven't changed it one bit since then. That's the original carbohydrate protein fuel of ours. It has a very neutral, bland taste. Some people say it tastes like liquid Cheerios. It may not sound very appealing, but I can tell you, once you're out there for several hours, having a neutrally non-sweet tasting fuel is actually kind of like a long-lost friend. It's really a pleasant alternative. In 2003, we introduced a somewhat similar fuel called Perpetuum. The difference between Sustained Energy and Perpetuum is very minor. You could probably use both of those in the same for the same application. Perpetuum has a little bit of healthy fat added to it. And the reason we did that is because it helps preserve the protein component longer, but it also tells the body that you're not starving it of fat. So then it will let go of its fat stores more liberally. That's my hypothesis anyway.
Okay.
So Perpetuum has a little bit of added fat to it, so it's more like a meal in a bottle. It also has a nutrient in there called sodium phosphate. We never put it in Sustained Energy. Sodium phosphate is just a great lactic acid buffering agent. But so for runners, either of those 2 fuels, if you're doing something in the 2.5, 3 hour range, Sustained Energy or Perpetuum will work perfectly. You could use them mix or match. When I do long workouts, I like to have a variety of fuels, and all of our fuels are compatible. So if you're doing a long run, you could use either Sustained Energy or Perpetuum. I think the longer that you go, and this is just me, the longer you go, I think the better Perpetuum works, but everyone is different, so those 2 fuels are really good for workouts in the 3+ hour range.
Okay.
I would also use Hammer Gel. I like to take care of my hydration needs with water. I just like the way water tastes. So Hammer Gel would be ideal for workouts in the 2 hour or under range, or they could be used as a part-time fuel when, if you're doing, say, a 5-hour workout, you could do 3 hours on Sustained Energy and 2 hours on Hammer Gel. if you don't like the texture of gel, because it does look like and taste like or have that texture like pancake syrup, we make a sports drink called Heed. So Heed is kind of like the powdered version of Hammer Gel. It's more than that, but for all intents and purposes, it is kind of like powdered Hammer Gel. So for long-distance stuff, we're looking at Sustained Energy or Perpetuum. For some variety in the menu or for shorter distance workouts, we're looking at Hammer Gel or Heed, either one of those two. And again, all of our fuels are compatible, so you can mix and match them. I would encourage everyone that's doing workouts to use Endurolites. That will take care of your critical electrolyte needs. You would want to take a dose before the workout and every hour during your workout. And then afterwards, Recoverite will take care of all your recovery needs, refilling the tank, so to speak, as far as glycogen, and providing some high-quality whey protein for muscle tissue reparation.
Perfect. Steve, I appreciate your time this afternoon. I really do. This has been very informative. And once again, I do want to make sure everybody knows that the Guide to Success deal that you've got on your website goes into all the detail and more that we just spoke about. And not only that, but it also goes into the products you just talked about and gives a lot better idea how much of which to take when, depending on your weight and
exactly.
and the conditions outside as well.
Yeah, one of the last articles in the current edition of the Guide to Success and in the 9th edition is called The Hammer Nutrition Fuels, what they are and how to use them. So that's kind of a primer on all of our fuels. It will give you all the details on every one of our fuels, how much to use, when to use them. It'll just provide everything you need to know about our fuels, why they're different than the other fuels that you may see on the market, and how you will benefit by using them.
I've got a 13-miler tomorrow morning, very early schedule, and I'm going to try the Perpetuum for the first time, so I'm kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's a great fuel because it's basically a meal in a bottle. You've got
and the Endurolites too. I've not tried that yet, so
yeah, that's going to be really important. Remember, the calories you're eating are the gasoline, and the Endurolites or the electrolytes are your body's motor oil. And then you'll take care of most of your fluid needs with water. And of course, if you mix up a bottle of Perpetuum, the fluid that's in the bottle counts towards your overall fluid intake. So definitely factor that in as well.
I appreciate your time, Steve. I kept you way longer than I thought I was going to and way longer than I told you I was going to.
Well, Kevin, that's my fault. That's my fault because, as you could probably tell, I'm very zealous about this subject. I'm passionate about it. I've made so many mistakes when I was starting in endurance athletics. I learned a lot of these things the hard way. I've been hospitalized even because of some really dumb fueling mistakes. And I don't want anyone to have to go through that. So if I tend to ramble on, it's only because I'm passionate about it. I want to see athletes, if they're going to spend the time, out there putting in the miles, let's get the most value out of them, and let's make it count. And so, if I tend to ramble on, it's only because I want athletes to get the full value out of every minute they put into their training.
Well, once again, I appreciate your time, Steve, and I hope it stops raining out there pretty soon for you.
Hope so.
Start building an ark.
Yeah, there you go. Or we start taking up canoeing or something.
There you go.
Kevin, thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.